Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sanyavadi Paschatya Satarni. We are now beginning our class. Not we're beginning our class, we're continuing our class entitled The 10 Habits of Highly Ineffective People, which is kind of a play on the 7 habits of highly effective people. And you all remember that story, the wedding story, where they were rowing all night and they woke up in the morning and they were in the same place. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told, and he told that is because the anchor was still in the water, remember? So I was thinking of this example, that you're trying to do something, and you all have experience of this. You're trying to do something, and you're working hard at it, and you're not succeeding. And there's something that's not working, and you don't know what it is. And I think in reviewing these 10 habits of highly ineffective people, I think there's 2 things to consider. One is you may not know you're doing it. The other one is you may know you're doing it, but you may not know that it's an anchor, that it's actually harming you. So I once got some very good advice. As Chanakya Pandit says, you can take gold from a filthy place. So you can marry a beautiful girl, a wonderful wife from a bad family, etc. So I got some very good advice, not from a devotee per se, but it's general advice is that if you spend, let's say you spend time reading a book, a very big book, and you only learn one thing, or you spend time listening to a class and you only learn one thing, or a seminar, or a whole workshop or a retreat, and you only learn one thing, but that one thing that you learn is so valuable that it makes a huge difference in your life, then learning that one thing was worth it, even if you had to spend a week in just hearing things you already know, but you learned this one thing and you didn't know you were making that mistake, or there was a bit of information that you didn't have that you needed to fill in the piece of the puzzle. So I think this course is going to kind of mimic that idea. You're going to learn something that you're not doing, or something that you're doing that's harming you. And consequently, you're going to suffer. And you didn't know that what you were doing was harming you. So last week, we did number 1. Number 1 was you don't like yourself. And we had a long talk about the need to take care of yourself, and that successful people, they don't demean themselves physically or emotionally or spiritually or in any way, but they take care of themselves. They are compassionate to themselves, and they take care of themselves because they have to be available for service to others. So that's why they take care of themselves. So today, number 2, and Sundari Radha, can you put this up? What is number 2? That'll be under Alana Rowe. She's going to put up number 2. Number 1, you don't like yourself. Number 2, I want to wait till she puts it up. But number 2, I'll give you it generally relates to, negativity. Okay, so number 2, you hold on to grudges. Grudges are like weights that burden you, suck your energy, impact you physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and cause the toxic past to create a toxic future. Grudges are emotional cancers. So, as a lot of you know, I've spent a lot of time studying this. So, Radhapriya, is this also showing up on my personal page? And will we see comments from the personal page coming up on this page, or will I only see comments that are coming on this page? And So Radhapriya is going to answer us, and if she answers that I will only see comments on this page, and I only know if you're watching if you're on this page, then if you're on my personal page, you should go to HG Mahatma Das and then log in, and then you'll, if that's the case. But we're going to find out. Radhapriya is going to tell us if I'm going to see your comments, and I'm going to see if you're present. So one of the big challenges of life is to be able to draw out a future which is not what's the word? I'm looking for the right word and I can't think of it. Draw out a future that is not demarked, is not determined, is not created from the past. Because if something happened in the past which you don't want to repeat, but the past affects you, there's every chance you'll repeat that behavior or you'll react to what happened. We can share the comments here. Does that mean you can share them from the other page, or does that mean whatever they say from the other page comes here? That's what I need to know. If they're on my personal page and they share, will I see it? Or I will only, are you saying I will only see what's on this broadcast page? HG Mahatma Das. I think that's what she's saying. So if you're watching this from my personal page, which is where I normally broadcast, I will not see, I think that's what she's saying, I will not see your comments and I will not see that you're here. So if you go off that page, if you want to comment, we only have one streaming. Does that mean that it's not streaming to my personal page? Because we were working on this. If it's not streaming to, I don't understand. She doesn't understand me, or I don't understand her. But there's two things happening. If you actually see this, my personal page, and you want to comment, come to my HG Mahatma Das page. That's the professional page. And otherwise, if Radhapriya, if that broadcast is, if it's not broadcasting on my personal page, then go to my personal page and put in a message and tell them that we're broadcasting. Oh, she saw it on both pages. So I think it means that if you're on my other page, I won't see your comments or questions. So if you want to write comments and questions, go on this page. We want to do more on this page. Yeah, so we won't see you, only see comments on this page. We want to use this page because I have 11,000 followers on this page, and the other page is limited to 5,000. So we want to start using this as the main page so we can have a bigger audience. Okay, so any of you watching and you're on the normal page that you normally watch, that I'm not going to see anything you say. If you want to comment, then go off that page onto HG Mahatma Das. And then, so we'll have to say this for a few weeks. Okay. So, if my future is going to be a repeat of my past, then that's good if my past is good, and it's not good if my past is not good. Or there's things in my past I don't want to repeat. But naturally, as we know, once burned, twice shy. Something happens to us, we get affected by it, it creates a fear or a caution or a belief or an attitude or whatever. Now, the problem is, and this is simple, but a lot of us don't realize it. The problem is that when we're going forward, a lot of times we're going forward with things within us that prevent us from going forward, and we don't even realize it. Certain ways of thinking or ways of believing or fears. And the reason we don't always realize it, sometimes it's more obvious, but sometimes it's so subtle, and the conditioning is so subtle, we don't even realize why we're not being successful. So holding a grudge represents this concept very, very clearly, because if I'm holding a grudge, then my relationship with that particular person is being defined by that experience whenever it was. Let's say it's 10 years ago. But not only that, my relationship with other people is also being defined by the experience I had with this person. So sometimes, for example, you may have bad experience with a person in a particular position, like let's say an authority, or a parent, or a teacher, or a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife. And it can create such an impression that you mistrust all authorities, or you fear all authorities, or you have a bad attitude towards all authorities, or all men, or all women, or all teachers, or all this or that, right? And so that's common. And I wouldn't say that's something that's strange or that means you have psychological problems, that there's something wrong with you. It's a common way we react, but there's a problem. Yeah. Turn the notifications on this page. Yeah, okay. So, Brother Priya, send out an email to everyone or send out a message, turn notifications on this page. So, it's quite normal. If you had a bad experience, then maybe you won't trust authorities because you had a bad experience with authorities. So let's take a practical example. How would that affect you in Krishna consciousness? Now, you're looking for a guru, and then you have this problem with trust because your trust has been broken in the past by authorities. The guru is also like a father. Your trust was broken by your father. It's very difficult for you to trust a person who's in a father figure or an authority figure or a father or authority. We use that as an example. So now you come to Krishna consciousness where you need trust in seniors, especially in your guru. You need trust. But you're finding it really difficult and you don't know why, and you think, well, there's something wrong with my Krishna consciousness. I'm not very advanced. And people tell you, yes, when you advance in devotional service, you'll have more faith. Faith increases as you advance. So you think, oh, I'm just not advanced enough. I lack faith. Or you'll think, or you'll be told, well, you need to understand the philosophy better, and that will increase your faith. Or you'll be told, you need to get good association, and that will increase your faith. Or you need to understand the importance of a guru. Or sometimes someone will even tell you, it's because of your past sins you don't have faith. You were born in this life without faith. That's a nice thing to say, right? But sometimes we've heard that, you lack faith. That there is some truth to it due to impiety. And then you'll be told you need to progress in your spiritual life and faith will increase. That is our philosophy. Faith will increase. But when you do that and you still are having difficulty trusting, now this brings us to the point of this topic. Isn't that interesting? Because you know where I'm going with that. You realize, we can see that you're doing well in your spiritual life, but you've been hurt in the past by someone in a position of authority, and you're holding a grudge towards that person. And that is the word I was using, edifying. That's edifying, or that's highlighting this current lack of faith. And in this scenario, I'm using this as an example, that in this scenario, it's not a problem, it's not a spiritual problem. It's a problem that you haven't overcome this grudge, you haven't healed from that, and so now there's this lack of trust. Isn't that interesting? Because being a devotee, if you presented this problem to anybody, they would tell you all these things. You need to hear more, associate more, you need to understand Guru Tattva more, etc., etc. You need to advance, chant better, and as you evolve, your faith will increase. But we're talking a little about a different kind of faith here. We're not talking about spiritually evolved faith. We're talking about damaged psychology. Now, I find this interesting, and I've spoken about this a lot, how this comes up in so many areas of our spiritual life. So this is not per se a spiritual problem in most cases. It's an emotional problem, or whatever you want to call it. And if you let the grudge go, it heals that relationship. It heals the past. So that past event is no longer edifying the present and the future. Now this is, I don't know, maybe it sounds simple to you. But let's just take it from my experience, because I've seen this. When we let go of past grudges, when we forgive people, all that stuff that was affecting you in the present, it doesn't affect you anymore. So let's just say, theoretically, if that is true, now you can see how damaging it is to hold a grudge. If theoretically it's true that as long as you hold a grudge, you will be affected in the present by something that happened in the past, and you'll be negatively affected. You'll be affected, as we were saying in the beginning, in a way that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to move forward to where you want to go, because you're being directed from events in the past. If that were true, and it is true, and even if you don't think it is true, for the sake of discussion, just accept that it is true. That being true, now you can understand how ineffective you become when you allow past situations to determine future choices, future actions, future attitudes, and current beliefs that will affect future actions, behaviors, and attitudes. Yeah. Global. And Sundararada says, for women, sometimes it's a global loss of faith. You lose faith in everything. And the thing is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anybody if they feel this way. In fact, I'm saying it's pretty normal and natural. But the point I want to make is it ends up creating a dysfunction for you. So you become ineffective in doing what you want because you're being controlled and pulled away from what you want by experiences in the past. So maybe we need to make a visual for this. You want to go ahead in a certain direction, and there's something pulling you in a different direction, and you can't go there. And it's pulling you from behind, and it's an experience from the past. And so you don't really understand why you can't go ahead. You just experience that there's so many things working against you to achieve what it is you want. And it's connected with, oh, I tried this in the past and this is what happened. Oh, I wouldn't trust these kinds of people. Oh, this never happens. Oh, I'm not good at this. And as I said, a lot of that is totally subconscious. You don't even know you're thinking of it. But what you do know is you're not getting to where you want to be. And so something's holding you back. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it. Okay, so Amrita Radhika is going to verify what I'm saying and make a confession publicly to the world. Okay, we're going to read it. What you're saying is true. I held resentment toward my parents for more than half my life, and it wasn't until I did my therapy and forgave them for what I thought was bad parenting, I let go of so many toxic patterns, and now I can actually let go of things so quickly because that core grudge was healed. Okay, so we didn't set this up. We didn't tell her to say that. This is, so she's confirming my experience. So this is just, we're talking now simply on a practical level, trying to analyze what happens when you hold on to a grudge. Okay, so it's connecting you to an event of the past that in some way is creating a fear or a limitation or creating a belief that's getting in the way of what you want to achieve. Now this is where it gets subtle, and we can't go into this deeply. This course here is kind of touching the surface so to get you to think, is this a problem I have, and should I go more deeply into this to understand it? So if you have an experience, it could be a good experience or a bad experience, but we're talking here about bad experiences. If you have a bad experience, unknowingly, it can develop within you an attitude about the world, or like Sundari Radha says, a global attitude, let's say, about men, or about marriage, or about work, or about money, or about japa, I never can chant good rounds, or about Krishna consciousness. I'll never be Krishna conscious in this life. Why? Well, I tried, and I'm not really that good a devotee. So you're defining your future. I tried to have good relationships, it didn't. I'm just not the right person for this. That could be true, and it's not a problem if it is true. It's a problem if you want to go ahead and do it again and make the mistake of trying to do it when you shouldn't if you have the wrong attitude. But let's take an example and say it's not true. It was one experience, but that one experience defined your whole attitude about that situation in general. And now it's formed a certain belief. It's kind of a universal way that you look at things, and you don't even know that's how you look at it, because the event created a new way of looking at things, which was subtle. You kind of are aware of it, but not so conscious of it. And it's playing out in all kinds of areas of your life, not just in this, let's say you had a bad experience with a man and you're a woman. It doesn't just play out in experiences with men. It may play out in other experiences that you feel you have fears of being exploited, and you have like core beliefs about exploitation, and any sniff or scent of exploitation, you just fight back. You get really upset. It doesn't have to be a man. It could be anything. It could be a company, a salesman, friend, whatever. And so that you're trying to understand, why is this happening? You don't even know. Because the experience created a belief. And now the belief is juxtaposed against you. Because a lot of times what happens is, we have an experience, a belief is created, and we don't even know we have the belief. Then we're going forward in life. Because this is so common and practical, I'm trying to develop a relationship in marriage or to get married, and I'm running into all kinds of problems. And many of those problems are results of the past. And I've developed attitudes that, in some cases, make it impossible. If those attitudes don't change, the beliefs don't change, it makes it impossible. In this case, we're talking about relationship. Makes it impossible to have a good relationship. But you can apply it to japa. You can apply it to sadhana. You can apply it to services. You can apply it to so many things. You tried something, it didn't work. A belief developed, I'm not good for that, I'm not qualified for that, I can't do that, whatever it is. And now you're in the future, and you want to achieve that. You want to get better. You want to improve your rounds. You're going to a japa workshop, this and that. But it doesn't last, because inside you have this belief that's saying, I'll never be good at this. I'm just not that spiritual. I'm not that Krishna conscious. This life, it's not going to happen in this life. Now, I know many devotees who say it's not going to happen in this life. I'll never be Krishna conscious in this life. Which is a bad thing to say if actually you want to be Krishna conscious in this life. So a lot of times when devotees say these things, I stop them and say, that's a belief coming out of you. And devotees will say so many things, just kind of nonchalantly, just typical of what they say. And I said, and I stop them and say, that's a belief. Oh, I'm so this. That's a belief. This is, and I said, you want to do this? And you go, that means it's going to be hard. That's just going, that's a belief. It's so subtle, right? So we have experiences which then create beliefs, and then now we have a belief which is opposing, or it's juxtaposed against the kind of beliefs I need to achieve what it is I'm trying to achieve now. That's where it starts to become ineffective. And so an effective person will have beliefs which align with their goals. An effective person will heal any past situations, or at least not allow past situations to have a negative effect in this way on their future. They'll make sure they're very aware of that. And so, as we said before, if you have any resentments, that is creating that past defining future, which is really not good if you want a different future. If you want the same future, it's fine. You'll have it. But if you want a different future than your past, and you allow those past experiences to have affected you with certain attitudes, then you're just repeating the future. So that's one aspect of this problem. I said they suck your energy. Okay, now let's look at this from a very Krishna conscious perspective, from the modes of nature. Prabhupada said resentment is anger, just manifested in a specific way. It's a variety of anger. It doesn't. It's more like passive anger. But anger is tamasic, and if you do kind of a philosophical overview of the modes of nature and the consequences of the modes of nature on our actions and consciousness, then it becomes obvious that the best place to be to evolve Krishna consciousness is, at least materially speaking, the mode of goodness. If I can live and think and speak and have a lifestyle that, as far as possible, is sattvic, that will make it the easiest for me to become Krishna conscious. Because the example I give is, if you want to board a train, the easiest place to board the train is the train station. It's harder if you have to run after the train when it's moving. So if the train is stopped, you just get on. But if it's moving, you have to run, like in those Indian movies where it's very exciting. That is more difficult. And then once you get off the station and then you want to jump on the train running on the tracks, it's even more difficult. So if we look at mode of goodness, like the train is stopped, it's at the train station, and the train represents transcendence, Krishna consciousness. That's the simplest step. It's just one little step onto the train. Passion is many steps in running, and it's a little dangerous, and it's harder. And ignorance is more difficult. Another way of looking at it is, here's Krishna, here's Sattva, here's Rajas, here's Tamas. So if you're looking at it this way, Tamas is the farthest away from Krishna, Rajas is closer, but Rajas is not what we want. But Rajas is better than Tamas, right? Because at least you're doing something. And then Sattva is right next. And you'll notice in the Gita, a lot of what Krishna says is Sattva is basically, you'll read it and say, well, this seems just like pure Krishna consciousness, sense control, cleanliness. It's basically lifestyle. It's sattvic brahminical lifestyle, which oftentimes is just synonymous with Krishna conscious activity. So having said all that, now let's start thinking about our lives. And let's start thinking about how we may allow tamagun to come in our lives. And if I allow tamagun to come in my life, which just means I'm acting in a tamasic way, then it's I'm supposed to be here and I act in a tamasic way, it pulls me here and I'm far from Krishna. So the more activities down here, the further I am from Krishna. The more activities up here, the closer I am. So it only makes sense that we want to be sattvic as far as possible. Resentment is tamasic. So let's say, for example, I have a good reason to be resentful. Now, I would say from this perspective, from the philosophical perspective, it's like you're saying, I have a good reason to turn my back on Krishna. You would never say that because it doesn't make any sense. People will look at you and say, what do you mean you have a good reason to turn your back on Krishna? There is no good reason. So let's look at tamagun, something like, it's like you've turned your back on Krishna. And so here's an event. I'm resentful. I'm holding a grudge. I have a good reason because of how they behaved. And we may agree objectively, yeah, you have a reason to be upset. The problem is that upset is now creating, or if it does, it creates resentment, which is this subtle form of anger. It's very tamasic. So it puts this tamasic cloud in your consciousness. And that becomes problematic for your spiritual life. Because tolerance, sometimes Prabhupada defines forgiveness as tolerance, sometimes he defines it as patience. The word is shama. And sometimes he defines it as forgiveness. So let's look at tolerance, patience, forgiveness. We need these qualities to be Krishna conscious. We have to tolerate others. We have to tolerate our own minds and senses. We have to be patient in the face of obstacles. We have to be patient in the face of our own shortcomings. These are extremely valuable qualities. When you give these qualities up, now you're acting in ignorance. And from that platform of ignorance where you're resentful, you lack patience, you lack tolerance, it basically, you're making it extremely difficult on yourself to be Krishna conscious. So my point is that even though you have the rationale, you can say this person hurt me and I feel justified in being upset, and I might say you are justified. But the problem is when you hold on to that resentment, now it's grabbing the mode of ignorance in your consciousness around you, and it's like you've turned your back on Krishna. So this is a little subtle trick of Maya. Somebody does something and that hurts us, and then it occupies our consciousness. And it doesn't have to be resentment. It can just be anger for a week, or a grudge, chip on your shoulder. What's happening, another way of looking at what's happening, and I'm giving you these visuals because I think I'm trying to inspire you to have the strength to be able to pull away from these things when it's difficult. We gave this visual in another class, but it's very powerful. You have a throne in your heart, and that throne is the place Krishna is supposed to sit. And you all know from experience that if you have anger towards a person, if you have upset towards a person, if someone, if what they've done or what they've said, either to you, to another person, or in general, if it really upsets you, if it hits a certain threshold of upset, that person begins to occupy your consciousness. And so in Sanskrit, when we talk about consciousness, we also talk about heart, we talk about mind. That person's in your mind, that person's in your heart, that person's in your consciousness. For the sake of this discussion, I want to use the analogy of heart. So now, that throne, which is meant for Krishna, Krishna can't sit there because you've just put this other person on the throne. And you know this for a fact because we've all had this experience. You're upset by a situation and you're trying to chant japa and you can't because this person is in your mind and you're really upset. And hold on, we're going to bring more light here. It's getting a little later, so it's not so bright. Yeah, it's okay. The sun is shining a little too much. And I know for many of us that if we're really upset, we can become consumed by the upset. And many, many devotees have told me, and I have experience also, if something's upsetting you, it doesn't even have to be a person, it's just something's upsetting you. That upset can be so huge that it occupies our whole consciousness, our whole mind, our whole heart, everything. And so even though we're chanting japa, which is Krishna's name, we're not thinking about Krishna, we're thinking about that upset, we're thinking about that person. And really, if you think about that, that, like Mahaprabhu says, I'm so unfortunate I have no taste. Well, think about this. I'm so unfortunate that I've taken Krishna off the throne of my heart and I've put somebody else there. And now that person that's there, I'm throwing rocks at. And that's what's going on during japa. And you know this has happened. If not to you, to somebody else, but I think this has happened to all of us to one degree or another. So that heart is where Krishna is supposed to sit. When I'm holding a grudge towards a person, tendency is I put that person there. That person replaces Krishna. So again, even if you're justified, even if what they did was wrong, the problem is now they're put there instead of Krishna. When you forgive them, what happens? Krishna goes back there. They go to a place where they no longer bother you. Your future is no longer defined any longer by this experience. Your consciousness is not absorbed in this resentment, grudge, anger, intolerance, impatience, whatever it is. And now you can free your consciousness to allow Krishna to sit in your heart and be more sattvic. So I think you understand what I'm saying. When you put things in this conscious context, then it kind of transcends the whole, but Prabhu, this was unfair, this was unjust. And I'm not trying to argue that it wasn't unfair or unjust. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying it may have been unfair and unjust, but you have to look at the consequences of how you respond to it. And sometimes, sometimes we may be right to respond in a certain way, but we won't, because we'll look at it and we'll say, if I respond in this way, it's going to be harmful to my Krishna consciousness, so I'm not going to do it. So sometimes we have to take that attitude. Now, there's another thing that's a parallel to this, or a sequel to this, is, and I think this is very, very important meditation for us. How should a devotee behave? What is the consciousness of a devotee? And when we look at the behavior of a devotee, sometimes for us it becomes difficult to follow that behavior, because we'll look at the circumstance, and in that circumstance we'll say, it doesn't seem fair if I let this person off the hook, or it doesn't seem fair if I'm nice to them. And one of the things I realized in trying to become Krishna conscious is that you can't always look at things in terms of what's fair and what isn't fair. Because if you look at it in terms of what's fair and isn't fair, you may start reacting in ways which are impelled, by passion or ignorance. Because when we look at what's fair and isn't fair, we are looking at it from the material perspective, and then so we get absorbed in passion and ignorance. Okay, it's not fair, and we might say, you're right, it's not fair. But then the next question is, how does a devotee respond to this? Was it fair that Takaharidas was beaten? Of course not. Was it fair that Lord Jesus was crucified? Of course not. Was it fair that Prahlad Maharaj was tortured? Of course not. Was it fair that Ambarish Maharaj was tortured? Of course not. But then what do you see? You don't see them reacting in the way that would seem likely or logical or necessary or justified. It's as if it didn't happen to them. And so why is that? Because there's a certain integrity that you have to imbibe as a devotee, irrespective of what happens. And so this is the challenge. This is like my teaching of forgiveness. This is one of the big obstacles I see. There's a certain kind of logic that if this person acts this way, it would be natural for me to respond in this way. And you could get sympathy from so many people. And people would say, yeah, you were unfairly treated. And as I said before, it may be true you were unfairly treated. And in fact, right now, what I'm talking about, let's take a situation where you were unfairly treated. But then the question comes up, so I was unfairly treated, but am I justified in responding from a position of passion or ignorance? And so the simple answer is no, because passion and ignorance will entangle you again. You may be justified in a certain sense if this person is a potential disturbance to others. That's another issue. But I'm just talking in general, like if you let this person go, it's not a problem for anybody. But you could be justified in retaliating. But then the question we have to ask ourselves is, I'm a devotee, and so what kind of behavior am I trying to exemplify? How does Krishna want me to act? How does Prabhupada want me to act? And so there sometimes is this polarization between part of you that's saying, this would be right if I did this. This would be justifiable, morally, ethically. And then this other part is, but spiritually, this is wrong. Get my hands there, right? This is right. But spiritually, it's wrong. And so sometimes we fight with this, right? That I should do this, and they deserve this, and it wouldn't be wrong morally, and they should be punished, et cetera, et cetera. But then we have to ask ourselves, but if I do that, how does that exemplify the behavior of a devotee? How does that align with what Krishna wants me to do? How does that affect my consciousness? How is that implicating me in this situation, implicating me in the modes of nature? How is that affecting what's in my heart, and how will that affect my future? Those are the important questions. And so what I've seen happen to many devotees, many people, is there's an attachment to justice, to acting in a just way. And it's hard to give up that attachment, to take it a little higher and say, okay, I forgive you. Okay, now let's take it to the next level. It's still on the same topic, but we're going to knock it up a level. In my work with helping people let go, one of the things I realized is there has to be a certain level of compassion. And the level of compassion has to come to the point where I don't need to punish that person and I don't need to get justice. Now, this is interesting on two accounts. Number one, a devotee is merciful, and number two, a devotee is compassionate. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur explained something interesting, and a devotee is humble. He said, if you're a devotee and someone hurts you, you'll think, I could take vengeance against that person and they deserve it and I could be justified in doing it. But I don't want anyone to suffer on my account. That's compassion. Even though they deserve to suffer, the compassionate devotee thinks, I don't want to see anybody suffer. So when I understood this philosophically, at the same time, I saw this happening practically in my workshops. I saw that unless a devotee came to a certain threshold of compassion, he couldn't let go. It was just, he would just feel, or she would feel like, I can't, they don't deserve it, I can't do it. Why should I do this? They don't deserve it. They should be punished. They're bad. There wasn't this sense of, I don't want to see anybody suffer. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, humility says, it takes it to a slightly different level. I don't want to see anybody suffer on my account. So number one, I don't want to see you suffer, that's compassion. And I don't want to see you suffer on my account, because I am justified in causing you suffering, so you would be suffering on my account. And I'm not that important that anyone should suffer on my account. He said, when this happens, forgiveness manifests. With this consciousness of humility and compassion, forgiveness manifests out of that. And I've seen that in my workshops. I've seen it happen again and again, where people are stuck. And there had to be a softening. You could use the example, or you could use the adjective softening, or an opening of the heart. And when there was a softening or opening, the resentment just fell out. And until that softening or opening was there, it was very logical. But why should I do it? They don't deserve it. It was like in their head. And it had to get into here, to compassion. And then the visual that I got was like the heart just kind of opened up, and the resentment fell out. And it wasn't like they wanted to pick it up. It wasn't like they were missing it. they just felt, oh, this feels much better, this feels right, or this is nice. It's not like, how can I do this? They deserve to be punished. Something shifted in them, that their heart opened, and a little more compassion came out. And I think this is important to share, because if we're holding on to a grudge, we go back to this logical reason that I'm justified in holding on to it. And I don't think we should look at it that way. I think we should look at it this way. No, I'm holding onto it because my heart is hard. And a hard-hearted person is not going to be successful in anything. You know, I was just talking to a godbrother today, and he told me when he took sannyas from Satsrut Maharaj, and Satsrut Maharaj told him something to the effect that just preach and teach and don't get involved with management and control and money. He said, and just be an example of spiritual purity, and people will trust you, and we need devotees that people can trust. So this is what it means to get to this elevated state where you can be free from harming people in your consciousness, in your mind. And you develop this consciousness where things will just come to you, and people will come to you, and people will trust you, and you will be able to help people. So, I think this is very, very important from a spiritual perspective. And then, the last thing I want to say, and then we can have some questions, is the meditation for us, anytime, whether it's a grudge, an ill feeling, anger, or any activity that does not exemplify the qualities of a Vaishnava, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for assessment. Okay, here's what happened in this situation. Here is how I responded. And so in this case, we're talking about I responded with a grudge, resentment, I held on to something. I didn't respond well, so let me reflect on that. What is going on? Because as I progress in devotional service, no matter what situation I'm going through, my responses should at least be sattvic, if not transcendental. And if I find I'm responding with a lot of anger, or it could be criticism, it could be intolerance, it could be frustration, it could be any quality which doesn't exemplify Krishna consciousness, but it exemplifies passion or ignorance, there has to be some reflection. Okay, now this is feedback. This situation is giving me feedback. Look how I responded to this. I thought I was patient, or I thought I was compassionate, or I thought I was this or that, a forgiving person. And now I can see in this situation, I'm not. Have you ever been in a situation like that? It's kind of depressing and scary, but you react in a very bad way, and you thought, you were thinking, I'm way over this. I don't act this way, because maybe you haven't acted badly in a long time. And then a situation comes, and you just say something wrong, you do something wrong, you lose some level of integrity, or you just slip in your words or behavior. And then you reflect on it, and you realize, I didn't think I had it in me, but I guess I do. And so these are times for reflection. When we're holding on to something this negative, and we can't let it go, and even though I'm chanting my rounds every day, even though I'm chanting good rounds every day, and I'm studying, and I'm doing service, and by all external signs, everything seems good, but this is happening internally, we have to reflect, and we have to say, okay, something's wrong. I'm not processing this correctly. I'm allowing this situation to drag me away from Krishna, drag me down into the laws of nature. That's important. And that's a whole other topic. I don't know if that may come up here. But, yeah. Anyway, so to summarize this, we're allowing past experiences to define future choices, past experiences to create attitudes which then work against us. We're allowing the past to define a future which is not a future we want, but it's preventing us from going forward. We're enthroning and enshrining hatred within our heart for a person. We're going out of alignment, and we're not reflecting the qualities of a Vaishnava, and we're making rationale or excuses for that based on the severity of the misbehavior of that person. And so we're saying something like, I don't have to act like a devotee because they did this. And I know if you think about this, you'll find this comes up in your life. Well, and you won't say, I don't have to act like a devotee because they did this, but that's basically what we're saying. We're creating an excuse or a rationale for not acting in a Krishna conscious way because that person didn't act in a Krishna conscious way. Isn't that interesting? Okay. You know the saying, I'm just going to take this, that was the summary, but I want to take this point a little further because I'm getting some inspiration. You know the saying, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So often when a person acts in a way which is not right, or let's say within the society of devotees, that is not proper, not Krishna conscious, then we feel like, I have a right to also not act in a Krishna conscious way because they didn't. And there you go, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So what's happening here is that we're allowing the behavior of another person to degrade our behavior. And that's a huge mistake. So this person has done something wrong. Now I respond with resentment. So I'm allowing their behavior to cause me to go down. And I'm justifying it, acting not in a Krishna conscious way, because they didn't act in a Krishna conscious way. And if you think about that, that's really, I'm just going to be blunt, that's really dumb as it gets. I'm going to try to justify doing something wrong because someone else did something wrong. And I'm saying this because I want you to reflect in your life if and when you have done that, or if you're doing it now, because it's dumb. It's really dumb. No matter what another person does, we are supposed to live within the integrity of our vows, integrity to the instructions of Prabhupada and our spiritual master and Shastra. And nothing is supposed to shake that. Nothing is supposed to validate allowing ourselves to act differently from that. But sometimes that's what happens. And our stupid mind is rationalizing it. Well, look what they did. I have a right to act this way because they did. You stole my wallet, so I'm going to steal your car. So you go, okay, go to court. Explain that to the judge. Well, did you steal the car? Yeah. Are you innocent? Are you guilty? No, I'm innocent. Why? Well, they stole my wallet. It's not going to work. It doesn't work on the material level. It's not going to work on the spiritual level. So we have Chitra Devi, who said, super interesting. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And now we have Valet, if that's how you pronounce Valet. You said that a devotee thinks, I don't want that anybody suffer on my account. What about when you know that if you don't make justice, or many people will suffer because that person, that hurts you? Yes, that's different. Could hurt and make suffering for more people. Okay, it's a very good question. How to act as Pandavas, that they do what they should do, but in their hearts they don't hold resentment. Yeah. Well, it's a very good question. Thank you for bringing it up. And there's 2 things here. One point she's making, Valet, I think it's a she, Valet, is that if I don't do something, other people will suffer. Definitely 100% true. And the position of the Pandavas who retaliated because they were cheated. And they're similar answers. In my study of this topic, and I think you could apply this to practically everything in Krishna consciousness, there's 2 things to look at. One is what you're doing, and the other thing is why you're doing it. And Prabhupada talks about this, I think it's in the 1st canto. He said, people see that we're printing books, people see that we're dealing with money, we're dealing with people, we're dealing with women, buildings, cars and so forth. And he said, they think we're just like everybody else. Look at so-called spiritual, and you're like everybody else. So, but they don't know the consciousness is different. So if a person has committed harm to another person, and that person will continue to commit harm, this is a more serious situation than what I was discussing. I was discussing just normal bad relationships. I wasn't referring to like physical sexual abuse, that level. And I don't know if you're referring to that, but I just wanted to say that. But it sounds like you're referring to a situation where this person would damage other people. And so, what do you do in that situation? The answer is you do something to protect other people, and you also protect yourself from that person physically, if that's necessary. And you also protect yourself internally. And you protect yourself internally by letting your resentment go. That's your self-protection. Your physical protection may be, okay, this person's dangerous, he needs to go to court and be put in jail. And if that is necessary, that's okay. Or not that it's okay, it should be done if it's necessary. But the motive of doing it would be to protect yourself and protect others, not to get back at them, not out of vengeance sake. Because when it's there to protect people, then you're acting Brahminically. When it's there to get back at him, then you're degrading. It's like, even Kshatriyas are not so much like that. Kshatriyas will act to protect other people. They'll fight for religious principles, for dharma. They'll work according to Shastra. If it's just raw enmity, I want to get back and stab that person because they stabbed me. Even you could be justified in doing that, but what does it do? Again, it goes back to this point where you become degraded because you're going out of the parameters of what is Vaishnava activity. So you want to stay within the parameters of the Brahminical qualities we're trying to develop, and at the same time protect devotees. Now with the Pandavas, on rare occasions, we have to start becoming Kshatriyas because there may be some bigger issues involved where administration is required and maybe even some martial protection is there. So that can be there also, but that's done to protect people, to save people, to help people. So it's a little different situation than what we encounter daily. What I was talking about was more what happens daily. Here, what you're talking about with the Pandavas is more what would a temple leader do, a GBC, an authority, how would they deal with the situation in which some people are being harmed by the activity of one. They may have to take actions that we wouldn't take in personal relationships. But again, they're taking it out of concern for the welfare of others, so they're not taking it to punish. Punishment, I can't say them to take it to punish, they're not taking it out of vengeance. They may take it to punish because that's their job, that's what they have to do. It's not your job and you do it, that's not good. If it is your job and you don't do it, that's also not good. So it depends your position, what your job is. But in ordinary affairs, sometimes you have to let Krishna deal with it. And sometimes you can't deal with it. There's nothing you can do. And you have to do the hard part of sitting back and watching. Just saying, okay, they're going to suffer and or not suffer. It's out of my control. So it depends on the situation. So we have Child Protection Office. Now there's a new office for sexual abuse, Office of Adults. So yes, we take action, but it's not that the people who run the office end up hating those who commit these crimes. They hate the crime, they don't hate the person. So that's also the idea. We don't condone abuse, but the abuser has to be dealt with in a way that doesn't diminish our position, doesn't diminish our consciousness, doesn't diminish our status, and at the same time protect those who have been harmed or potentially could be harmed. So without any more details about specifics, then I can't say more than that, but the rule of thumb in this discussion of your question is hate the sin, not the sinner. Then I heard one person say, What is this interesting? Hate the sin and love the sinner. And that is more in the mood of a Vaishnava. You know, this is very, very difficult. I don't even think most devotees think about this. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta said, a devotee is one who only, or he said we should, be one who desires the greatest good for our worst enemy. And so obviously, that's a huge challenge for a conditioned soul. You know, sometimes we have an enemy, and maybe if we're really able to well deal with it, we just come neutral. Like, you know, that would be considered really good. He's an enemy, he's attacked me, he's cheated me, he's lied to me, he's stolen from me, and I'm neutral. But really, as a Vaishnava, the goal is to love your enemy, to want the greatest good, not want to attack, not want to make them suffer, not want to demean them, but want the greatest good even for your enemies, to not be thinking, oh, I wish this person will suffer, that will give me pleasure if I see them suffer. He stole from me, he lied to me, he cheated, she lied, she turned against me, he turned against me. And then you get news that they got into a car accident and they're suffering and they've broken their bones and you don't know, nobody knows if they're going to live, and then you're thinking, deserved it. That's what you get when you offend me. I hope he rots in pain the way he made me rot in pain. Devotees don't feel like that. And if we do feel like that, we shouldn't feel like that. It's not what we're cultivating. That's the point. So if you take this statement, we should only desire the greatest good for our worst enemies, and you meditate on it, then that's like forgiveness on steroids, isn't it? Because, you know, when you forgive somebody who's done something wrong to you, it's kind of like you're loving them for no reason. You think, why should I love them? There's no reason. Well, you should, because that's what a devotee does. I was reading the story today of Alachua and Manigriva, and so in looking at that story, you find there's a reason, but not really a reason, that Nalakuvera and Manigriva were saved. They didn't do anything to deserve it. Right? You know, how, you know, if you could get intoxicated and find some girls and go out on a naked beach and play, and that's the way you get to see Krishna, well, we must be doing something wrong. Because that's what they did, and that resulted in them getting to see Krishna. And of course, that's not the process to see Krishna. That's not the recommended process. That's the recommended process to not see Krishna. And that's how they got to see Krishna. And it doesn't make any sense. And Narada Muni, when he saw them, he said, he thought to himself, these are the sons of Kuvera. This is really bad. I'm going to curse them and bless them at the same time, that they'll get to meet Krishna. He had that power to do that. And so that's what he did, and there was no reason. There was no reason for Narada to love them, but he did. And so that's the mood of the Vaishnava. There's no external reason to be so kind and compassionate, but he is. Like, I was writing my Vyas Puja offering this morning, and I was saying in my offering, Prabhupada, you know, I served you in inadequate ways so many times. You know, things that you asked me to do personally, and I failed to do some things entirely. And you never gave up on me. You kept instructing me, kept allowing me to serve you. So you might say, there's no reason that he would do that, other than that's the heart of the Vaishnava. So forgiveness embodies this love your enemy. They don't deserve it. They actually deserve your vengeance. They've done something in which if you retaliate, everyone will say you're justified, and you don't do that. Instead, you say, I forgive you, I bless you, I hope the best for you. You know, people will look at that and say, that doesn't make any sense. And our logical mind will say, That doesn't make any sense. Why should I do that? That's crazy. It's like I'm being stupid. I'm being taken advantage of. But when you actually analyze it from the Krishna conscious perspective, what you're doing is actually elevating you more and more and more. So you're not being taken advantage of, but that person who hurt you actually becomes a stepping stone for you to rise higher in Krishna consciousness. That's the way to see it. And if you see it that way, it's going to be so much easier to rise above all these negative, toxic reactions when people deal with us in certain ways. We won't give in to them because we know that's not how a devotee should respond. Okay, we have more. I hope you appreciate that and understand that. This is very important. Amrita Radhika says, generally people who abuse others have serious mental disturbances and are acting out of their own dysfunction. It is not within their control a lot of the time. That's true. And there's something else that's true. I forgot what else is true. How could I forget? That means I'm tired. Okay, let me read it again. Generally, people who abuse others have serious mental disturbances and are acting out of their own, and are acting out their own dysfunction. It's not within their control a lot of the time. I totally forgot what I was going to say, but I will remember it. Okay. Valley says, if we feel all this, what can we do? I think I answered your question, Valley. And if I didn't, ask me again. Okay. Amrita Radhika has questions. It's getting very psychological. So she says, can we use unhealthy patterns such as codependency and channel it towards Krishna? So having the desire to be codependent with Krishna instead of your husband, for example. If it's unhealthy, it's not going to work with Krishna or anybody. It'll just get weird. Because transcendental, quote-unquote, codependency is different from a dysfunctional codependency of this world. So I would be careful about putting your dysfunctional codependency on Krishna. That could end up weird. And later in your life, you could end up quite weird. So we could talk about that more. I would say that's a warning. If the codependency is healthy, if it's based on a pure heart, pure surrender, and so forth, yeah, of course. But if it's based on a dysfunction, it's going to be a problem. Can you please also talk about having effective boundaries with others, which will help stop the tamasic behavior? So, this is good you pointed out this, and I would rephrase or add to the question. Having boundaries at the same time not being resentful. Having boundaries at the same time not being, not lacking compassion and so forth. Boundaries simply are like resistance levels of in which spheres you can function in a healthy way. So if we look at it like weight, how much weight can you lift before you're going to pull a muscle or fall over and hurt yourself? And so a boundary is, I want to give myself to people as much as I can. What is that point where I allow a person in too much? Or what is the point where I allow the wrong person in? So that I start to not being able to function normally and effectively. That's how you create boundaries. And the boundaries, if you say, for example, okay, I've forgiven this person, so then we think if I've forgiven him, then that means we should reestablish the relationship. But the relationship may be unhealthy. And so what I would say is you remove the negativity in that relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean you want to interact with that person again. So you create that boundary because you see it wouldn't help your spiritual life, or it would specifically would damage your spiritual life, or your emotional life or physical life if you didn't create boundaries. So boundaries are there to create an environment in which you can function well. And you might say, but if I were more Krishna conscious, maybe I would have bigger boundaries, or I wouldn't have any boundaries. And we would have to say, yes, that's true, at least to a sufficient degree, but you're saying if I were. And the point is, right now, you have to deal with where you are, not where you should be. And that becomes a problem sometimes. You say, well, I should be like this. I should be like this, but I'm actually like this. So I have to act from this platform, not from the platform I can't act where I should be. So we shouldn't become upset saying, well, if I were up here, I could act this way. That's true, but you're down here, so you have to act that way. So you have to create boundaries according to what will enable you to function successfully, materially and spiritually. And as you advance or grow, mature, boundaries may change. But to give up those boundaries prematurely could be destructive. And so you have to see. It's just a matter of self-preservation. We once had this brahmachari, and he was driving us crazy. He would just talk about everything in the universe, except there's one thing he never talked about: Krishna. But he talked about everything else, and he would joke, and we would do traveling sankirtan, and some days, we'd drive from one city to another for 8 hours, and by the time we got there, he would drive us crazy. Nobody could deal with it. And so we, one day we just said, look, we can't deal with you talking about all this stuff. Just talk about all these things in the material world from his past and so forth. And so, yeah, you have to have boundaries to protect your spiritual life, that's for sure. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, not only is there nothing wrong with it, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to create those boundaries. Otherwise, how will you function? Right? So again, it becomes motive. Why are you creating the boundaries? What's the point? You're creating the boundaries so you can better serve. And maybe you regret having to create boundaries with certain people, and you realize, well, it's due to my lack of Krishna consciousness or due to my immaturity, whatever. I should be able to create bigger boundaries, but at this point, if I do, I'm going to pull a muscle. It's too heavy for me. So then you have to deal with that. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's the truth. Now, we're going back down to Valley, Valley, Valley. Then back to Amrita Radhika's question is, generally abusers have serious mental disturbances and they're acting out their own dysfunctions. Yeah. So one, I think the point Amrita Radhika is making by saying this is, if you understand this, you won't take vengeance against somebody, because you'll just see they're handicapped and they can't do any better. Oh, I remember the point I was going to make. There's two things in this scenario to remember that can help you. People don't stay the same. So maybe 10 years ago you were mistreated by this person, but that person may not be the same. That's point one. Unlikely they are. Number two, that person may be very regretful right from the get-go when they did that, but you don't know that, and so you're holding a grudge against them. And they're holding a grudge against themselves. They're feeling very sorry for what they did, but you don't know that. And so sometimes that happens, that this person is regretting what they did. The person is working on themselves and improving them, and you're beating them. And you don't know they're beating themselves also. And it becomes very strange if you ever find out that there's this person you had lots of resentment towards, who was going through a whole process of remorse. And it was kind of like you were beating a person who was on the ground. And so that's something to remember. And then Valley, Valley, if we feel all this, what can we do? I'm not sure, maybe I wasn't reading your question properly. So did I answer your question? That's the question. I find a lot of the time, this is Amrita Radhika, I get women thinking it's okay to dump their emotional disturbances onto me because their needs are not being met in their relationship with their husbands. Sometimes I feel a need to be more tolerant and accommodating toward them. Okay, that's good. However, I'm not their therapist either. So it's a constant balance between being kind and compassionate, but also protecting myself. Their own issues. There's a interesting purport to the story of Jagai and Madhai. So Prabhupada was explaining how Nityananda saved Jagai and Madhai, and as you know, Jagai and Madhai were hard nuts to crack. I don't think your average Prabhu would have been so effective with Jagai and Madhai. They probably would have been killed by them. But Nityananda Prabhu was able to help them. So Prabhupada said, actually, can you hold on a minute? It's so hot in this room because the weather is crazy. It was freezing last night, so I closed all the windows, and now it's hot. I have all the windows closed. Just want to open a door. Don't go away. We'll finish the answer. All I have to do is remember what I was saying before I come back. Just give me like 20 seconds. I can breathe now. Okay. More light. You want to see out my door? See what it looks like? Yeah, there. When you look out my door, that's what you see. There's a house. It's not our house, it's our neighbors. They're devotees. Okay. So, in this story, I can breathe now. It's really, it's useful to be able to breathe, isn't it? I think it helps your brain, doesn't it? So, Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada was describing how Nityananda Prabhu was able to deliver Jagai and Madhai. And he said, but not everyone would be able to do this. And then he said, I think the answer to your question, he said, you have to know your capacity. And then you have to endeavor to do what's within your capacity. So if you're trying to deliver in Jagai and Madhai and you're Bhakta Burfi, then it's going to have a very bad effect on you and it's going to have a bad effect on them. So he was saying, don't attempt don't attempt to do something that's beyond your adhikar, your qualification, spiritual qualification, because it will backfire. And I think that it would also answer that codependency on Krishna thing. It has to be real. And so you have to look at your capabilities according to your spiritual position and then act accordingly. And the only problem with this is that we want to be able to do something more, and sometimes we just have to acknowledge that we can't, although we might feel like we should or we would like to, and the shoulds are painful. I should be able to do this, and my Guru Maharaj wants me to do this, but if I do, I know I'm either going to burn out or I'll become in some way negatively impacted by it, and it's going to have a bad result. Now, I did some training in counseling once, basic counseling. And one of the things I was told that I think relates to this is that even in the professional world, sometimes the counselor or a therapist is dealing with a patient. They may not be able to deal with them because the patient is describing events or has a lifestyle which is so repugnant to the counselor or the therapist that they can't listen. Like they're graphically describing things that are so repugnant to the therapist. They'll just say, I can't do it. They'll stop them and say, I can't. You'll have to find another person. As your therapist, I can't deal with this. It's just, it's like, if you're a therapist and you're a devotee and they're describing very sinful activities that they're doing, so I can't hear this. It's too disturbing. So that's a reality, and you deal with that reality. So that's, and that you have to deal with. And as you grow and mature, it'll change. So, Pandora Hinston, Vrindavan Leela, says, when do you think a devotee should do, what do you think a devotee should do if there is a work bully at their job? Most bullies have narcissistic personality disorder, and they do not have any compassion. Yeah. I think you should ask Sundari Radha. She's the expert in it. I think she'd say, whenever you see them, run the other direction. Get a job in a different place. Get shifted to another office. I can tell you what I do, but I'm not you, so it's going to be some variety of distancing, and it's just, I distance myself internally from such people. I may be kind and, cordial and so on, but internally distanced, so I don't have to deal with them, or I just understand. I understand how they'll act, and I don't expect anything other than what I've seen. And if it becomes too difficult to work with them, then you'll have to see if you can work with some person who's not a bully. Or, I'm not an expert in bullies. Actually, I can't say. I never had a job, official job like that. But I've always tended to keep my distance from such people. So if you can't keep the physical distance, keep it internal, emotional distance. And I think also, well, I do have some experience with some very dysfunctional people, and I've learned some good lessons, is not to invest time in them, not to expect them to understand things logically and reasonably, and to expect them to will let you down and will waste your time, and often will just disturb them, even though what you said is totally reasonable. So that may help you also. Don't expect anything from them. And the less you expect and the less you interact, probably the better. At least I'm not an expert in narcissistic people, but that is at least something I think as a starter. And Sundari Radha, you want to say something? Okay, she says, you need to avoid them on every level. Report and have no expectations they change or do better. Yeah, okay, so I got it right in the head. She's the expert. She said it in 10 words. Took me like 100. Okay, so it is now 7. My time is 7:23. Your time is what? 9:23 in the morning? The Valley has another point. Yeah, I don't think, Cinderella says, I don't think all bullies have narcissistic behavior. Yeah, they may not. I was thinking the same thing. In the past, I had some difficulties to set boundaries, and I was thinking that for allowing people to cause me pain, I was being kind, good, and all that. But I was acting in a mood of ignorance, not as a devotee. Could you please talk about all this confusion when you act in a level of compassion that you don't have? Oh, yeah. Well, in Mayapur, we were giving lots of classes on being real. And one of the main themes was you have to act according to your level. So if we use compassion, you have to act according to your level of compassion. And generally, when you act compassionately, it can increase your compassion. It can give you more compassion. But I think specifically, we're not talking here about being compassionate like in general, like going out and preaching or giving out prasadam or book distribution. But we're talking about one-on-one interactions with people who may be toxic for you or disturbing you or even dysfunctional. and you want to be compassionate, but the point is, you have a certain level of compassion, and beyond that, it's probably going to become worse. So you basically want to see, how far I can go before I crash, before I can. How much compassion can I give? If I go too much, then I go like that. Then the relationship becomes toxic. So then you could ask, how much do I have? And that's the question you'll have to answer. How much compassion do you have? How much can you deal with and still maintain sanity? So as you progress, you'll have more compassion. As you have more compassion, it's easier to give of yourself. You'll give more and more, and you won't be drained. If you're getting drained giving, it means you have to stop at that point when you're getting drained. Right? As you have more compassion, you get less drained. You can go. And go and go, and you see how Prabhupada could go, never stop. No matter what happened, he could keep going. So that's how you know you're getting affected by it. Is that okay? General answer. So Zora. Thank you. Yes, we can't have an expectation of people to understand us coming to this realization. Some people will never understand. Okay, so I think we can end here. That was the second dysfunction. It was multifaceted. Don't hold, you could say, don't hold on to grudge, don't hold on to negative energy. It's not going to produce anything positive. Don't try to get back at people. That's not what we do. There's a strange noise in the microphone. It's the result of bad internet. As far as that's all I could say. Not in my house and not in my office. So we're a little bit far away. Okay, but the class is over, so the strange noises. Thank you for watching, and so it'll be 6 o'clock every Saturday to facilitate the devotees in Australia. And Hare Krishna to all of you. And share the class if you like. If you think it'll help others, share it with them. And if you're awake and alive and well tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. my time, which I think is kind of late for you in Australia, unless you're a night owl, or unless you go to bed early and get up. But every morning at 8 a.m. for those of you who can attend. And we want to start putting the classes now on. Topic tomorrow is dying. We've been talking about dying. And I'm just dying to talk about dying. It's such an interesting topic. It's just amazing. It's just revealing so much. So we're talking about that. We're reading from Prabhupada's books. We've been doing that for 2 weeks every morning at 8 o'clock. And so we're going to do it on this page now. If you watch on the other page, you won't be able to chat. Yeah. So if you're up at 10 p.m. in Australian time, yeah, you can watch it. If you're in Perth, then it'll only be 6 o'clock, right? Or 7, so if you're in Perth, you can definitely watch it. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.